I'm David. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is May 23rd, 2018. I have a sponsor. My sponsor knows he's my sponsor. He has a sponsor. I have a home group. In that home group, I have a service commitment. And like Christine said, I am a Caron alum. And I am now, as of last September, a Caron employee. And it is really, truly a gift and unbelievable to be on this call and introduce myself that way. That's something that I never thought would ever happen. So it's certainly a gift of being in recovery, and it's a gift of the great community that I got once I went through Caron. So I'm here to talk about the second step. Yeah,
Oh, hold on, David, you muted.
thanks. Can everybody hear me now? All right. So I was just saying I'm not going to try and tell too much of my story because I can tend to do that a little bit. I really want to focus on the second step. Um, when Christine asked me to do this and asked me like what step would I want to do, I didn't hesitate at all. Um, I wanted to do the second step. For me, the second step is like just for me, it was the most important step, and it's my favorite step now. And step two reads, I came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Um, and for me, step two was the thing that kept me out of AA or kept me from fully buying into this program for a really long time. I found myself to treatment through an intervention that my family had that sent me to detox. And then that detox offered me a few different options. And I grew up in Pennsylvania, and the pictures that I saw in the brochure of Caron looked very similar to where I grew up. And I was like, okay, that seems like the place where I should probably go. Um, and I didn't know anything about AA really. I didn't know anything about 12-step programs, but I knew that the way that people talked about like 12-step programs, like when we were having the conversation about where to go to rehab, people would say the term 12-step like it was something that I shouldn't like. Like they would kind of gloss over it, they would mention it quickly. I just had a sense that there was going to be something about 12-step programs that I wasn't just going to like accept and be on board with at the beginning. And when I first saw the steps, I knew that step two was that thing. When I read step two and it talked about a power greater than myself and people talked about God, I was like, okay, this is all about God. Like I'm here, to be a religious person now. Like that's what's going to save my life. Like, no, thank you. I have no interest in that. And for a long time, I really didn't get past that, that part of the program. And I think, when I talk to newcomers and when I meet people that first come into the rooms, that's always the sticking point, or it's often the sticking point is, like how do you believe in God? How do you get through that step, if you don't believe? And early on, a lot of people told me to read We Agnostics in the Big Book, which, I've never been a huge fan of We Agnostics. Like for me, it's just a little too much like, like, oh, we didn't think we would ever fly airplanes and now we do. We didn't understand atoms and now we do. And like for whatever reason, I just didn't like do it for me. But the 12 and 12, the chapter in the 12 and 12 on step two, I really, really like. There's some really great stuff in those few pages. And I wanted to kind of start this by reading one of them. And it's something that I usually say to people when they say, well, like, you know, I don't believe in a power greater than myself. Like, this just isn't for me. Like, I just can't do it. And it's on page 26, and it says it's talking about um, you know, like what you have to do for step two when you come into Alcoholics Anonymous. And it says, first, Alcoholics Anonymous does not demand that you believe anything. All of its 12 steps are but suggestions. Second, to get sober and to stay sober, you don't have to swallow all of step two right now. Looking back, I find that I took it piecemeal myself. Third, all you really need is a truly open mind. So I think like the first part of that is really important. Like you can come into Alcoholics Anonymous, you can be a part of the fellowship, you can share in meetings, you can have a sponsor, you can have a service commitment. You don't have to do anything past that. Like the steps themselves are suggestions, including this one that talks about God. And I think if nothing else, like that's something that helps people um, you know, stay in meetings and to continue to get sober. I think, in terms of the second piece where you don't have to swallow it all right now. My sponsor told me when I first got here, are you willing to believe? Do you believe that I believe? And if I really thought about it, like I argued a lot at the beginning about, what it meant to believe and, like how did I know that he really believed? So how could I believe it if I didn't know whether he was telling it? Like it didn't really matter. Like if I could believe that he could believe, that was enough for me to kind of get started. And then the third piece of it is, all you really need is an open mind. For me, that's about humility. And that's one of the reasons why I really like the second step now is, the fact that I got through the second step, that I do believe in something greater than myself, it kind of proves to me that I have humility, that I was able to have an open mind, that I was able to set aside, the fact that I first read that step and was like, that's just not for me. It's not something that I'm going to be able to do. So I was thinking earlier today about, doing this and how I came about finding a power greater than myself and what that looked like in my recovery. And, as I started going to meetings, like when I was at Caron, I went to a few meetings in primary care, and then I did, an extended stay at Caron, and like we went to a meeting almost every day. And as I did that, I started to notice that the people that seemed like the happiest or that were dealing with stuff in their lives the easiest were the ones that had some sort of reliance on God. Like they talked about God more in their shares. They weren't afraid to say the word God. And so when I finally started working with a sponsor and we got to this step, I was like, all right, like I need to believe, like, that's what the step is. It's coming to believe. All right, I believe in God. Like, let me find a church. Like, I'm gonna start praying every night. Like, maybe I'll join this Bible study. Like, I was all in because I wanted to be just like those people that kind of like had what I wanted in the meetings. But obviously that didn't work because it wasn't like I wasn't really being open-minded. I wasn't really being truthful to the journey that I needed to go on to find a power greater than myself. So I stepped back and I said, okay, this group, like a lot of people do, this group is a power greater than myself. I think there's this guy. So I moved to DC for this job. I moved from Raleigh, and there was an old timer in the meetings in Raleigh who used to say, the way you stop drinking or the way you get stay sober is you stop drinking. And if you have trouble not drinking, then you go to meetings. And if you go to meetings, that's where you get the rest of this program. And for me, like getting like stopping drinking to stay sober is step one. Like if you can't do that. And then you go to meetings, and that's step two. That's saying, okay, I can't do it by myself. Like I need something greater than myself. And the first part of that is going to a meeting where there's people besides you. And that was the first step for me, kind of understanding a power greater than myself. And then over time, that kind of evolved into recovery itself being my higher power, or Alcoholics Anonymous, or just kind of having this belief that if I connected with these people and did this program, I could become a better version of myself. That was something that I really, really wanted. And, that grew out of me going to meetings and kind of getting connected. It wasn't something that I came up with on my own. It wasn't something that I wanted at all when I was drinking and using for sure. Um, and so, that was enough. Like that was enough for me to continue going through the steps. And as I've stayed sober and as I've stayed in this program, um, my conception of what my higher power is continues to change. And sometimes it's really strong, sometimes it's really weak. Um, I talk about God, like I kind of use the language that the big book uses, like I say, he and him and the word God. And that doesn't mean that I have any idea what God is. Like I don't know what God looks like. I don't know God, I don't know where God is. I have no idea about any of that stuff. It's just easier, just like at the end of a lot of meetings. I know they do this in Berks County. They do this in some meetings in DC too. You'll say the Lord's Prayer. Like I really don't like saying the Lord's Prayer at the end of meetings. Like I would much rather say the Serenity Prayer, but I just kind of accept that that's part of the community of this program. And I would much rather stand there and like hold hands with people and say the Lord's Prayer than sit there kind of resentfully being like, I don't, I'm not a Christian. Like, I don't want to say this prayer. It's kind of the same for me with using the word God and saying he and him. Like, that's just the vernacular of the program that I like using. It doesn't necessarily mean that I believe that, that God's a man or a woman. So, all that's to say, it's definitely changed over time for me. What I believe God is or what God is in my life. So, um, it definitely continues to evolve. And I think, it's been an interesting journey to look at that step and be like, okay, this is the thing that's keeping me out of this program, or it's keeping me from fully feeling like I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, to today, um, it really, I think it is kind of the thing that, um, I don't know, it's just, I have, so when I helped a friend get sober in Raleigh, and he liked to ask me, like, you hear people say in the meetings, like, like, don't leave before the miracle happens. And, I don't think this, he didn't end up staying sober. And one of the things he always pressed me on was like, well, when did the miracle happen for you? When did the miracle happen for you? Um, and I don't think there was any one particular point where the miracle happened for me, but um, like starting to go into meetings and talk about God and being able to do that and like reading this step and identifying with it as opposed to looking at it and being like, oh, this is something icky that I really don't like want to think about or want to admit that I believe in. Um, that was such a big change for me. I mean, like, um, it's something that I kind of can't believe. And, as I've thought about I've been through a lot of changes in this year. Like I moved from North Carolina to DC, and I started a new job in a new field doing work that I've never done before. I left a lot of friends behind in Raleigh. I'm moving back to a city where I used to drink and use. It's the first time I've lived somewhere where I actively use since I got sober in 2018. Um, and like it's easy for me to think, okay, I'm gonna lose all those things. Like I can quickly get fearful. About that. And that's a very familiar feeling to me. It's something that I've, had for most of my life. But what's new is the thought that now kind of immediately comes after that. Like, regardless of what happens with any of those things, most of the time I have this foundational feeling that I will be okay, that like whatever's going to happen is supposed to happen and I'll get through it. And that's because whatever happens is God's will. And I live my life for so long thinking, okay, I know better, or how can I work really hard to make this thing happen that I want to happen or not happen that I don't want to happen? And it didn't work. That's a total change for me. Like, even to be sitting in this meeting and saying that, like, I kind of can't believe it. But that's my next thought when that fear crops up now, and that's a totally new thing. And obviously, like in the moment, let's say, I really, really start to struggle living in this new place, or I lose this job. Um, I'm not gonna in that moment be like, oh yeah, like it'll all be okay because like I depend on God and like that's fine. But because of this program and the community that I built up around me, I have a lot of people to reflect that back to me and say no, no, like this is awful and whatever, but you will get through this. And that, just like God, is a power greater than myself, having those people around me to um you know kind of help me through that and let me see that when things get difficult till I get through it, and then I get back to a place of remembering that, oh yeah, um whatever happens is what's supposed to happen. And as much as I think I know about what's supposed to happen, um I really don't. So, like I said, the second step um, is my favorite step. I mean, having a reliance on God is not something that I ever thought I wanted or needed. And I sometimes when I'm in meetings, I'll say like, oh, before I got sober, I really did. I was an atheist. I believed in science. I didn't believe in God. But really, the truth of it is, I didn't think about God much at all. Like I went to church growing up. I was in a youth group when I was in high school, and I never like sat down and really thought about God or what I thought God was or whether I truly believed or not. It was this program um, and recovery that really forced me to look at that and go through this journey of connecting with the power greater than myself. Um, and like I said, it's not something that I ever thought I wanted or needed, but it's really been, an amazing thing. I mean, getting sober was the most important thing in my life, and I think coming to believe in a power greater than myself is the most important thing about my recovery. I mean, I don't think it would be possible. Um, without it. So I think that wasn't quite 20 minutes, but I would love to hear what how where people are with the second step. I think I don't know. I mean, for me, like at this point in my recovery, uh, I don't know. My belief in a higher power is such an important part of my recovery. I didn't talk about it a lot when I was earlier in my recovery. And I wish I had because I wish I had gotten to this point sooner. And I would love to hear where everybody is. And um, yeah, so thank you so much for letting me share. It was truly an honor to get to do this. And thank you.